The telephone rang unexpectedly. It was the photographer, his voice a strained whisper. "Sir, there's something you must see, but please don't say anything to your daughter yet." Before the next day was over, I would discover the full truth about my son-in-law and the profound way he had betrayed not only my daughter, but me as well. Before I continue, I want to express my gratitude. Your presence here, listening to my story, means more than you can imagine. Certain tales are a heavy burden on the soul, and sharing them feels a bit lighter with someone by your side. I'd love to know where you're listening from. And if these lessons from a long life resonate with you, please consider subscribing. Your support allows an old man to continue speaking his truth, one narrative at a time. You see, when you reach a certain age, life finds a comfortable cadence. There are the quiet mornings, a ceramic mug warming your hands, and the subtle protests of your joints, reminding you that the body keeps its own schedule, regardless of your plans. My name is Samuel Vance. I'm 70 years old, a retired architect. My hands are calloused from a lifetime of drafting plans and walking construction sites, but they are still steady enough to hold a coffee cup and a fragile memory without trembling. I reside in Oak Haven, Oregon, a town where people still offer a friendly wave. The man at the hardware store knows your project history, and the town square's clock has always been 5 minutes slow, a charming imperfection nobody has the heart to correct. Since my wife Eleanor passed a decade ago, my life has been defined by the routines we established together. I've learned to cook things beyond scrambled eggs. I've managed to keep her prized gardenias blooming, though a few of them always seem to droop, as if unsure which direction the sun will come from. And every evening, I find my way to the porch swing, watching the sky fade behind the tall pines, feeling as though time itself is apologizing for its constant departure. My daughter, Amelia, has always been my greatest source of pride. She's a doctor in Denver, grounded, brilliant, and possessing a kindness you can't teach. It's simply woven into a person's spirit. She calls me every Sunday, just as she promised her mother she would. In our family, you don't break your word, not if you were raised with integrity. So when she informed me she had met the one, my heart seemed to swell in my chest, like a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. His name was Julian Croft. He had a dazzling smile, a refined way of speaking, and a confidence so sharp it could slice through steel. He discussed venture capital and market trends with the same fervor I reserved for structural integrity and classic design. We came from different worlds, but we shared a similar passion. He looked at my daughter as if the universe finally made sense whenever she entered a room. For a widower who had long prayed his only child would find a genuine love, that was all that mattered. Their wedding was like a scene from a glossy magazine. It was held at a botanical garden in Denver, with lanterns hanging like captured stars. I wore the same suit Eleanor had helped me choose for our 40th anniversary, and I could almost feel her hand on my arm as I walked to my seat, as if she were whispering, "Look at our girl." We did a good job. I stood in the front row, my chest full, my heart overflowing, and watched Amelia blink away tears as she walked toward him. A young woman embracing her future with hands that trembled slightly, just as mine once had. I recall murmuring to an old friend, "Our children have certainly surpassed us, haven't they?" He just smiled and nodded in that particular way fathers do, when pride carries a faint, sweet ache. The reception was a dizzying blur of heartfelt toasts, sparkling lights, and a constant flash of cameras. His family had spared no expense. There was elegant silverware, music that drifted through the air like fine silk, and champagne that flowed as if from an endless spring. I even risked a slow dance, my knees complaining, but my joy carrying me along. That evening, I returned to my hotel, loosened my tie, and sat on the edge of the bed, gazing at the ceiling. I whispered into the stillness, "Eleanor, our girl is in good hands." For the next several months, I held that belief close. I tended to the gardenias, sipped coffee on the porch, and debated the merits of different fishing spots with the same old friends at the local diner. Amelia would send photos periodically, a mountain hike, a trip to a vineyard, elegant dinners where the candlelight softened their world. She looked radiant, and seeing her happy is a father's ultimate triumph. I remember thinking one afternoon, with the sun casting a gentle glow on my porch, that perhaps life had finally entered its most peaceful chapter. A time of quiet pride, watching my daughter build a life and a family, just as I once had. I wiped the dust from my old drafting table, inhaling the scent of paper and graphite, and considered designing them a hand-carved hope chest for their first anniversary, a tradition built from wood and love. At night, I would close the curtains, glance out at the yard, and say a simple prayer. Keep her safe. Let her be loved. Let her stay kind. I meant it with every fiber of my being. But life rarely gives you a warning before the ground gives way. Sometimes the tempest arrives without a sound, like a shadow gliding across your porch, as subtle as dust settling on your most cherished memories. I didn't realize it then, but those tranquil evenings and quiet prayers were the last moments of calm before my world was turned upside down. Just when an old man starts to think his battles are behind him, life serves a reminder that peace is often borrowed, not owned. And my loan was about to be called in. It began on an unremarkable Tuesday. It's strange how life's greatest fractures seldom announce themselves with thunder, but rather with the simple vibration of a phone on a countertop and a voice that carries a hidden weight. Mr. Vance, it's Ben, the wedding photographer. His tone was strained and weary. I need you to come to my studio, please. And don't tell your daughter just yet. My stomach didn't drop. It clenched the way it does when a man who has lived long enough recognizes the scent of trouble. Is Amelia okay? There was a pause, then a quiet sigh. Yes, your daughter is fine. But, sir, there's something you need to see. He asked me to come by myself. That phrase, by myself, landed with the thud of a heavy tool. I put on my old wool cardigan, the one with the worn elbow patches, and started the drive. The traffic into the city was a crawl, each stoplight a punch of anxiety in my chest. I wasn't sure what I was afraid of. Only that fear was now my passenger. Ben's studio was dimly lit, camera equipment scattered about. He looked exhausted, his eyes red-rimmed, as if he'd been losing an argument with sleep. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly. He dispensed with pleasantries, offering no coffee or small talk. He just turned his laptop toward me. "Look at this." The first image appeared. It was my son-in-law, Julian, in his wedding tuxedo, but he wasn't on the dance floor or beside my daughter. He was standing near a service entrance, partly obscured, with his arms around a woman in a sleek dress. His hand was placed firmly on the small of her back, the way a man touches someone he considers his own. The air left my lungs in a slow hiss. That was no friendly hug. That was not a relative's embrace. "That's not Amelia," I whispered. Ben nodded, his voice low. "Her name is Chloe." She was introduced as his business partner. The words felt sharp, serrated. He clicked through more photos, each with a timestamp. Julian vanishing during the speeches. Chloe slipping out just minutes later. His return, his hair slightly disheveled, his tie readjusted. I remained silent. Men of my generation don't often shout when they're wounded. We just bleed more quietly. "Mr. Vance," Ben went on, "they've been running a fraudulent financial firm together for years, preying on older, vulnerable clients. He presented documents, corporate filings, transaction logs, a list of names. "My mother," he whispered, his voice cracking. "She trusted him. She lost her life savings. She passed away believing she had failed." He looked at me, his eyes hollow. "She didn't fail. They robbed her." I leaned back, letting the truth settle in my lungs like fine dust. Then came the final, devastating blow. "Sir, based on what I've uncovered, it appears you were their next target." The room grew cold, not with fear, but with a chilling clarity. Julian hadn't married my daughter for love. He had married her to gain access to a list of potential victims. My daughter was the key. I was the vault. I clasped my hands together, my knuckles white but not shaking. I was steadying myself, the way I would before making a critical measurement on a blueprint, one that could not be undone. Ben watched me, likely expecting me to break down. But when a man has already buried the love of his life, pain registers differently. It doesn't shatter you, it forges you. "Does my daughter know?" "No," Ben confirmed. I couldn't bear for her to hear it from me. "Good," I said. "A person deserves one last night of peace before their world is torn apart." I looked at him. "Show me everything." And he did. He showed me security footage, bank statements, fabricated investment reports, and the names of elderly people, some of whom I recognized from the wedding, their smiling faces now linked to this cruel deception. When the last piece of evidence had been shown, I didn't weep. I didn't rage. I simply sat there, breathing in and out until the air in my chest no longer trembled. My daughter will not be destroyed by this, I vowed in a low voice. And I will not allow him to take anything more from her or from anyone else. It wasn't anger or a desire for revenge, but pure resolution. I stood up slowly, feeling the weight of my years and the purpose of the years I had left crystallize into a single point. Ben swallowed hard. "Mr. Vance, what are you going to do?" I looked toward the exit, the same one Julian had used on his wedding night, and with a voice so quiet it could have been mistaken for surrender, but so firm it could have been forged from steel, I answered, "I'm going to be silent for now." But not for long. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't crack. But deep inside, something clicked into its final, immovable place. And in that moment, I understood that silence wasn't weakness. It was preparation. When I returned home that night, I didn't bother with the lights. The house felt altered, not strange, just heavier, as if the very walls were aware of what I had seen. It was as if the air itself knew that something precious had been fractured. I hung my keys on their usual hook, but the small metallic sound seemed to echo with finality, closing a chapter one hadn't even known was ending. I sat at the kitchen table, my hands flat against the cool wood, my breathing steady, too steady, the way it gets when your heart hasn't yet caught up with the terrible knowledge in your mind. There were no tears, no outbursts, just a profound silence that settled into my bones like the chill of a winter morning. I stared into the shadows of the room, the only sounds being the low hum of the refrigerator and the deliberate tick of the old clock on the wall. Each second landed like a reminder that life marches on, even when you desperately wish it would pause. My daughter's happiness, the beacon I had cherished for months, now felt as fragile as a candle flame flickering in a drafty hallway. I pushed myself away from the table, walked out to the porch, and eased myself into the swing. The chains groaned under the familiar weight, a chorus of my age and its own. The night sky was a vast, dark canvas pricked with soft, distant stars. Eleanor used to sit right here beside me, her feet tucked under a blanket against the evening breeze. She would hum softly to herself, a tune only she could hear. I found myself rubbing the old house key on my ring, the metal warming under my thumb. "Eleanor," I breathed out, the word more a thought than a sound. "I wish you were here. I wish you could help me guide her through this. Grief isn't always a storm. Sometimes it's a quiet, dense weight just behind your ribs, pressing down with every breath." I thought of Amelia as a little girl, her hair a chaotic mess after a nap, her shoelaces perpetually undone as she ran toward me shouting, "Daddy, watch this," before attempting some daring, unnecessary feat. Eleanor used to laugh and say she was born without the caution gene. She loved with that same fearless abandon then, and she had loved that man with the same whole heart. Now, that brave heart was poised to be broken by a truth I had to deliver. Some nights, you don't cry, not because you're strong, but because you fear that if you start, you may never be able to stop. I got up again, too restless to be still, and made a cup of tea I knew I wouldn't drink. I just sat and watched the steam rise and dissipate, like a spirit trying to escape. My phone lit up with a message from Amelia. "Asterisk, love you, Dad. Hope you're having a good night, asterisk." I stared at the words, typing and deleting my reply over and over. Every possible response felt either too false or too alarming. In the end, I simply wrote back, "Love you too, sweetheart. Sometimes love means shielding someone from the truth until the moment is right." The next morning, I went through the motions of making breakfast out of sheer habit. The toast grew cold, and the coffee sat untouched. I went outside with the hose and watered the gardenias, which were already damp with dew. The petals drooped, accepting more water than they needed, much as I was holding more pain than I felt I could bear. The neighbor's cat sauntered over, its tail held high, and rubbed against my leg. I scratched behind its ears because sometimes your hands just need to offer comfort to something when your heart cannot yet comfort itself. Back inside, I picked up a silver-framed photograph from the mantelpiece. It was our family years ago. Amelia in her graduation gown, Eleanor's head resting on my shoulder, my arm encircling them both as if I could protect that circle from ever being broken. I traced the line of the glass over Amelia's smiling face. "You didn't do anything wrong," I whispered to the image. "You just loved the wrong person. The ache inside me didn't burn. It settled, like the fine dust left behind after sanding a rough piece of wood smooth." When I finally went to bed, sleep was a distant country. The ceiling stared back at me in the darkness. Sometime after midnight, my breathing shifted. It wasn't heavier, but cleaner, more defined. And that's when I sat up, planting my feet firmly on the floor. There was no rush, no panic, just a sense of purpose filling the space where the hurt had been. A man eventually learns that some storms are not meant to wash him away, but to carve a new river through the landscape of his life. I took a long, slow breath, my hands steady on my knees. And there, in the quiet darkness, I began to think. Not about pain or revenge, but about protecting what I held dear and about doing it with quiet dignity. By then, grief had done its work. Resolve had taken its place. That night, I became sharp. I was awake before the sun the next morning. No alarm was needed. I was stirred by that quiet imperative a man feels when life is no longer asking him to feel, but telling him to act. I splashed cold water on my face and looked in the mirror at the man staring back. A man shaped by years, by loss, by love, and by lessons that time never teaches gently. He wasn't broken or vengeful. He was certain. The kettle began to hiss. I measured out the coffee, moving with a deliberate slowness that came not from age, but from intention. In my work, I always knew that haste leads to ruin. When you're shaping a structure, or the truth, or justice, speed is the enemy of precision. I sat at my small kitchen table, my hands wrapped around the warm mug, letting the first light of dawn settle into my bones. Then I called Ben. He answered on the first ring, his voice still frayed. "I'm ready," I told him. Just 2 words, but they were built on solid ground. He let out a breath, a sound of scraping relief. "We'll do this the right way, sir." "Samuel," I corrected him quietly. "When you're about to walk into a storm with someone, titles don't matter much." We met at a small cafe on the outskirts of Denver. It was the kind of place where the coffee is a little too strong, but the air feels honest. Ben was not by himself. A woman with a calm demeanor and clear, perceptive eyes sat with him. "Detective Isabella Rossi," she said, introducing herself. "Financial Crimes, Elder Exploitation Division." That phrase, elder exploitation, landed like a nail being driven slowly and deliberately into wood. I gave a single nod, a lifetime of steadying gestures contained within that small movement. "What do you need from me?" She observed me for a moment. People often mistake age for fragility, but wisdom forges a different kind of strength. "You'll pretend to trust him," she stated plainly. "You'll let him make his pitch. Let him think he has you. And when he makes his move, I finish for her. You'll be there." She gave a small, affirmative nod. "Precisely." Ben slid a manila envelope across the table. It was filled with records, printouts, and copies of signatures. The paper felt heavier than it should, like holding a truth that had not yet hardened into consequence. We outlined the plan, step by quiet step. There would be no shouting, no chaos. Just the sharp, patient edge of justice. Driving back later with the desert wind brushing against the car, I whispered to myself, he thought he married a shield, but I've been a shelter my entire life. And a shelter does not yield to wolves. When I got home, I went to my old drafting desk, the one where Eleanor used to sign birthday cards and where I taught Amelia how to draw a straight line. It was where life had happened, in pencil smudges and good intentions. I opened a fresh notebook, not to vent but to document. I wrote down names, dates, and moments when Julian's questions about my finances had been a little too pointed, his praise a little too polished. I saw the patterns now, the red flags I had once misinterpreted as simple interest. With my reading glasses on, my hand was steady as I wrote. Purpose is a better brace for a man than pride ever could be. Then, I called Amelia. We talked about the weather, about a movie she'd seen, about her week at the hospital. She asked if I'd been fishing lately. I told her I was proud of her. I didn't say his name. Not yet. A truth, like glue, only holds when the timing is perfect. After we hung up, I looked at Eleanor's photograph. Her smile was soft, yet certain. You raised a stubborn daughter, I murmured to her. But I will do this right. That night, I ironed a shirt, not because I had anywhere important to go, but because dignity is an armor that never wrinkles. I polished my shoes until the leather gleamed in the lamplight. Before heading to bed, I paused in the doorway, my hand on the frame, and whispered into the quiet house. For her. It's always for her. The photographer's call had changed everything. But sometimes change is a blessing disguised in a rough coat. The stage was set, the parts were cast, and all I had to do was wait for the truth to speak louder than the lies. I arrived early for the meeting. Men of my age often do, not from anxiety, but from a deep understanding of life's rhythm. When you stand on the precipice of truth, you don't rush the moment. You let it unfold. His office was on the second floor of a gleaming glass tower, all sterile shine and no soul. The plants were artificial, and the air was thick with a perfume that smelled more of ambition than integrity. It was a space designed to impress and distract, not to comfort. I wore a simple, pressed shirt, my polished shoes, and the quiet assurance of a man who had weathered far greater storms than this. He smiled when he saw me, a smile that was too wide, too practiced. "Samuel, you made it." His voice was like sugar laced with something synthetic. "I did," I replied softly. He led me to a conference table where folders were already arranged, the pens aligned like a row of soldiers. He craved control, or at least the illusion of it. "Today is the big day," he chirped. "You're going to feel so much better once this is done." An interesting choice of words. I nodded, playing the part of the trusting old man he believed me to be. He slid a stack of papers toward me. Transfer authorizations, account access agreements, the fine print thinner than his loyalty. "Just sign here, and here," he instructed, "so we can reposition your retirement assets for maximum growth." His tone softened, wrapping false concern in a neat bow. "You've worked your entire life, Samuel. You deserve to relax now. Let's take care of everything for you." I picked up the pen, rolling it slowly between my thumb and forefinger. "Before I do," I murmured, "I'd like you to walk me through it one more time, step by step." His eyes lit up like a predator that has cornered its prey. "Of course," he cooed. "The process is completely seamless. Your funds are moved to an overseas holding company temporarily. From there, we circulate them through our exclusive investor pool. You'll see returns within 90 days. And these returns," I asked, my voice quiet, "where do they come from exactly?" He didn't miss a beat. "Arrogance makes fools of men. From the capital of new investors, initially," he said. "It's a standard growth cycle. Everything balances out in the end." My hand paused. There it was. The confession, delivered with casual, self-assured pride. I looked at him, a long, slow appraisal, not with anger, but simply to measure the moment. "And my daughter," I asked, "did you move Amelia's money the same way?" "You should too. Trust the process." It was the final nail. I set the pen down, neatly and deliberately, beside the papers. He frowned. "Is something wrong?" I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I leaned back in my chair, folded my hands calmly on the table, and whispered, "I believe we're finished here." His expression contorted, a rapid succession of fear, anger, and the dawning recognition of a game he was no longer winning. "You agreed to this," he hissed. "You promised to move forward." "I've reconsidered." "You can't do that." "I just did." His voice grew sharp as shattered glass. "Samuel, do you have any idea what you're risking?" I nodded slowly. "Yes, my self-respect. And I don't gamble with that." Before he could say another word, the conference room door opened. Detective Rossi stepped inside, with Ben right behind her, a small recording device in his hand. 2 uniformed officers followed. "Julian Croft," the detective said calmly, "you are under arrest for financial fraud, elder exploitation, In multiple securities violations, his face went from pale to flushed to a mask of hard fury, a predator trapped and baring its teeth. "You set me up," he spat at me. I met his glare, my own gaze as steady as stone. "No," I said gently. "You set yourself up the moment you chose greed over the people who put their trust in you." He lunged for his phone on the table, but an officer intercepted his arm. The click of the handcuffs was sharp, decisive, and final. As they led him away, he threw one last hateful look over his shoulder. "You think this is over?" I'll let the silence be my answer. Some truths are strong enough to stand on their own. After they were gone, I let out a long, slow breath. Justice doesn't always arrive with a roar. Sometimes it walks into a quiet room with steady hands and clear eyes. Ben put a hand on my shoulder. "Your daughter's going to be so proud of you." I swallowed against a tightness in my throat. "I didn't do it to be a hero," I whispered. "I did it so my little girl wouldn't have to spend her life wondering why the world had been so cruel." Outside, the sun felt warm on my face. Not triumphant, just kind. And I realized something profound. Freedom doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just sighs. I walked to my car, got in, and sat for a long moment with my hand on the steering wheel. In that deep quiet, I finally felt free. I still sit on my porch most evenings, in the same old swing, with the same view of the street where children ride their bikes and neighbors wave as if nothing in the world has changed. The funny thing about the truth is that it doesn't detonate your life in a single blast. It unravels it slowly, patiently, one thread at a time. And that, I've learned, is how you must weave it back together. Amelia still visits on Sundays, not from a place of fear or duty, but from a place of gratitude and a love that has been tested by fire and refused to become bitter. She sits on the porch steps, a mug of coffee in her hand, and sometimes we talk for hours, and sometimes we say nothing at all. And somehow, that comfortable silence feels like everything. I don't look at her with pity for what she endured. I look at her with immense pride for the person she remained through it all. Strength isn't about being loud. It's the quiet decision to stay true to yourself, even when betrayal tries to carve away pieces of who you are. Occasionally, I think of him, not with hatred, but with a kind of sad understanding of how a person can become so lost chasing something that will never make them feel secure. You can't build a lasting home on a foundation of stolen futures. He now sits with his consequences, and I sit with my peace. It seems like a fair exchange. People sometimes ask if I regret waiting so long to act. The answer is no. Silence is not the same as surrender. Sometimes, silence is simply the season before justice is ready to bloom. And when it finally did, it was steady and clean, rooted not in anger, but in truth. I remember the title of this story, how 6 months after my daughter's wedding, the evidence revealed everything. In the midst of it all, I would repeat that phrase to myself, not as a reminder of the damage, but as a promise of the clarity to come. And clarity always arrives if you have the courage to wait for it. I don't wish him pain or suffering. I just hope he learns, because learning is the only true form of redemption any of us can ever hope for. Perhaps that is the real gift of growing older. It's not frailty, but the wisdom to seek justice without cruelty and to find strength without shouting. So, if you take one thing away from my story, let it be this: patience is not weakness, and trust is not foolishness. And when your dignity is challenged, you can reclaim it quietly, steadily, and completely intact. After all of this, sleep comes more easily. A sense of peace rests in my chest like a smooth, warm stone. And that, I have finally learned, is worth more than all the money in the world. If you stayed with me through this journey, I thank you. Let me know in the comments. Would you have confronted him immediately, or would you have waited quietly, as I did? And if you'd like to hear more stories from an old voice that has seen a few things, please go ahead and subscribe.